today we're going to look at what is a civil law and what is a criminal law. To answer this question, we first need to know what is a law. So let's start there with the definition of a law. A law is a rule of conduct that must be followed by members of a community within that community. A law is a rule of conduct that must be followed by members of a community within that community. So then, what is a community? A community is a society of people occupying the same place under the same laws and regulations who have common rights and privileges. Under this definition, a lot of things could be a community. Where you work can be a community. It can be your work community, your coworker community, where you live. A housing community. Is it an apartment, a single family home, a van, a boat, an RV? All of these are housing communities. How about the city you reside in and the state? Those are communities, as well as the country you are in. And it's possible, of course, to have multiple communities. So why does the community matter? Well, because the society and each is going to be different, and therefore each community is going to have different rules. The same is true for the community in the state of Arizona and the community in the state of New York. They're very different. Likewise, North America, very different community. From South America, very different laws. Also, what about the work community? If you have someone, say, that works in a coffee house, someone who works in a police station, and someone who works in a law office, they're all dramatically different communities. And again, this is really important because they're going to be governed by different laws. Now, let's go back to the definition of community one more time. A community is a society of people occupying the same place under the same laws and regulations who have common rights and privileges. Within this definition, it mentions laws and regulations. So we know what a law is. We've already defined what a law is, but now we need to know what kind of law is it? What kind of law is it? Most laws fall into two main categories. There is a third category, which I'll touch on briefly in just a moment. The two main categories that we're going to discuss today are civil law and criminal law. Civil law and criminal law. The third main body of law is administrative law, but we're going to save that for another lesson. So we have civil law and criminal law. So we've defined a law in general. We know what a law is. So now the next step is figuring out what is a civil law. What is a civil law? So let's go back to our community. Many communities that are governed by elected leaders, such as cities, states, counties, countries, for example, they all have city, state, county, federal, etc. rules and laws that govern them. These laws are codified. This means that the laws are written down and organized by numbers or codes so that the members of the community and the community leaders can all easily and quickly find the laws. The laws passed by the city, state, county, federal government, etc. are often categorized as either civil or criminal. Civil or criminal. Remember, this takes us back to our two main bodies of law, civil and criminal. There are also laws that have been interpreted by judges. These are called common laws. or case laws. So you get these laws by reading cases, the summaries, the opinions of judges. This is an entire topic all on its own, so we're going to save this for another lesson. For right now, we're going to stick with the codified law made by the cities, the states, the federal government, etc. There are a number of differences between the two, between civil law and criminal law. There's quite a lot. So we're going to cover more in detail in the very next video that follows this one. For now, we're going to focus on the single greatest difference between our civil law and our criminal law. There's one really big difference that we're going to learn about today. If a law is classified as a civil law, then a harmed private citizen can sue the lawbreaker. They can sue under the law. If a law is classified as civil, an individual party, me or you, can sue under the law. We can sue the lawbreaker. However, this is the opposite when we look at criminal law. Under criminal law, only the government can sue the lawbreaker. Civil law, private parties, myself, you, your family, my family, the relationship between individual parties, we can sue each other under civil law. Under criminal law, the government is the only one that can bring a lawsuit, and we'll talk more about what agent from the government and how this works in the next videos. So let's take a look at a few examples. There are some areas of law that are commonly considered to be within the practice of civil law. Areas such as personal injury, property damage, and family law. All of these generally allow private individuals to sue. Whereas criminal laws that fall under statutes such as murder, manslaughter, burglary, when these laws are broken, when these codes are broken, only the government can sue. Only the government can sue. Now, note that you can have a broad category of something that's generally classified as civil, and there can be an individual section or an individual law within that body of law that could be criminal, and vice versa. This gets a little bit tricky, so let's look at a specific example. I've mentioned that the area of family law typically tends to be civil. An example of a civil law would be, again, family law. Let's look at Maryland laws because I am presently in Maryland. So if we look at the Maryland family law, we are in 52A05. It states, a minor who is married may file an action for divorce under Title VII of this article and shall be deemed emancipated for the limited purpose of obtaining a divorce. Notice it said, a minor who is married may file an action for divorce. What is the action? It's a lawsuit. It's a lawsuit. A lot of people don't realize that when you get divorced, you're suing the other person for an end of the marriage. So a marriage is a contract. You want the contract to end legally, you go to court. This is considered a civil law. This fits perfectly within the general standard of family law is civil, right? This is an example where it mirrors the common practice area. Suing for divorce is something that private citizens commonly do. The government does not do this. You don't see the government suing any party for a divorce of another party. It's civil. Let's look at an example now where criminal laws can sneak into areas that are typically civil. we're going to stay with family law in Maryland as an example. Here we're going to look at 2202B1, and it states, an individual may not marry the individual's, can you guess where this is going? Grandparent, parent, child, sibling, or grandchild. I feel like there's a couple things that are missing from the list, but an individual may not marry the individual's grandparent, parent, child, sibling, or grandchild. It's very specific. It's enumerated, right? This is the law. The law in Maryland under the family law codes are that an individual may not marry these specific relatives. Subsection 2 states, an individual who violates any provision of this subsection is guilty of a misdemeanor on conviction, and on conviction is subject to a fine of $1,500. $1,500. So if you're willing to pay the $1,500, okay, so subsection 2, notice the language, right? It doesn't do the same thing that the previous law just did. It does not tell us that the individual can bring an action or bring a suit or file a lawsuit or go to court. It doesn't say any of these things, right? It says that they will be guilty of a misdemeanor, and on conviction of the charge of a misdemeanor, they could be subject to a fine of $1,500. So notice how different that language is. So we'll get into what each of these specific terms mean in a later video. But the important thing to recognize right now is that that was a criminal law, right? It was a criminal law found within, hiding within what is typically a body of civil law. So we've learned what a law is. We've learned what a civil law is. And finally, we've learned what a criminal law is. In this next video, we'll learn several more differences between the civil law and the criminal law.